I want you to come with me to a wedding, Lucas said to Ivy, who looked stunned at his demand. She burst out laughing, disbelief written all over her face. You must be joking, she said dismissively, but Lucas wasn't smiling. His expression was serious, almost desperate. I'll pay you 10 million, he said, his voice but with an underlying urgency. Ivy's laughter faded instantly as her eyes widened in shock. She had never touched that kind of money before. Here stood a man well-dressed, confident and leaning against an expensive car, asking her to join him at a wedding and pretend to be his woman. It didn't make sense. Ivy was a homeless 25-year-old woman who had seen the worst that life could throw at her. Just a few years ago she had a home, a small modest apartment in the outskirts of the city. That was before the government decided to build new roads and tear down everything in their path, including her home. They were promised compensation, promises of new homes and a better future, but it was all a lie. Months passed. People like Ivy, families, workers, and children found themselves on the streets, living in tents and makeshift shelters, yet no one came, no one cared. The promised compensation never arrived. The government's words turned to dust, and Ivy was left to navigate the cold, harsh streets with nothing but the clothes on her back. When she lost her home, she also lost her job. The company she had worked for claimed they cared about their employees, but in reality, they cared more about their reputation than the well-being of the people who made their business thrive. They told Ivy they could no longer keep her on, that her situation was bad for the company's image. She couldn't argue. She had nothing left to argue with. She'd been forced into a cycle she couldn't escape. Job hunting became an exhausting routine. Every day she walked from one interview to the next, only to be turned away. Maybe it was her appearance. She had to bathe in streams to avoid the public restrooms. And after staying on the streets for days without a proper bath, the scent that clung to her was impossible to ignore. Maybe it was her tired eyes or the way her clothes had worn thin, but whatever it was, she never seemed to get the chance she so desperately needed. And now here was a man offering her a life-changing sum of money, asking her to pretend to be something she wasn't. Why me, she asked, her voice shaky but curious. Lucas hesitated, his gaze dark and conflicted. I need someone to attend a wedding with me. I'm supposed to bring someone, and I need it to look real. Ivy frowned, her confusion only deepening. I'm not asking for anything crazy, Lucas continued, as though trying to reassure her. Just come with me, pretend to be my partner for the night. There are people I can't afford to disappoint. Ivy's eyes narrowed. What's in it for you? Lucas hesitated again, almost as though he was debating whether to be completely honest with her. It's complicated. The people at this wedding, they're from my past. I need them to think I'm happy, that I've moved on. A million questions rushed through Ivy's mind. What kind of man would ask a stranger, someone who had nothing, to pretend to be his partner for a night? And why would she agree to it, especially when it felt so wrong? But then the thought of $10 million hit her, and Ivy couldn't ignore the temptation. 10 million could change everything. It could take her off the streets for good, give her a future, a chance to rebuild. But there was a price to it. There was always a price. She thought about the cold nights, the hunger, the con struggle. She thought about how much she wanted out of this life, how desperately she wanted a fresh start. All right, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'll go, but you'll need to explain a little more. I don't do things Without understanding why, Lucas nodded, his face softening for the first time since the conversation began. "I understand. I'll explain everything later. But I need you to trust me." Ivy hesitated as Lucas opened the passenger door of his sleek black luxury car. The glossy finish gleamed under the fading sunlight, and she could see her worn-out reflection in the tinted window. Her fingers brushed nervously against the seatbelt as she slid inside. The leather seat felt cool and smooth beneath her, so soft it felt like she was sitting on clouds. Lucas rounded the car and slid into the driver's seat with effortless grace as the engine purred to life. Ivy caught the faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with the new car smell that filled the cabin. The dashboard blinked with high-tech displays she didn't recognize. It felt like stepping into another world, a world she had no place in. The car pulled smoothly onto the road, leaving behind the broken streets Ivy had come to know so well. She stared out the window, watching the scenery blur past: the street vendors, the crumbling sidewalks, the people struggling to get by. All of it faded as Lucas drove them toward wealthier neighborhoods. Silence hung between them, broken only by the soft hum of the engine. Ivy stole a glance at Lucas. His jaw was set, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a quiet intensity. He looked calm on the surface, but she sensed there was a storm brewing beneath his cool exterior. "So is this the part where you tell me what I've just agreed to?" Ivy asked, her voice breaking the tension. Lucas's lips twitched slightly, almost like he wanted to smile, but the serious expression remained. "We'll talk when we get to my place." Ivy frowned but didn't press him. She wasn't sure if it was curiosity or the promise of $10 million that kept her quiet, but either way she stayed put. As they drove further, the surroundings changed drastically. The buildings grew taller, sleeker. Ivy spotted high-end boutiques, restaurants with gold-lettered signs, and people strolling casually with designer bags slung over their shoulders. She felt a pang of discomfort. She had spent so long on the outskirts of this world that seeing it up close felt like stepping into a dream or a nightmare, depending on how you looked at it. Finally, the car slowed as they approached a gated driveway. Ivy's mouth fell open slightly as the gate slid open to reveal a sprawling estate. The house, or more accurately, the mansion, stood like a modern castle, all glass and steel with sharp, clean lines. The garden was meticulously landscaped with hedges so perfectly trimmed they looked artificial. Ivy had never seen anything like it. "Welcome to my home," Lucas said quietly as he pulled into the driveway and parked near the entrance. Ivy swallowed hard as she stepped out of the car, her shoes scuffing against the pristine stone driveway. She felt out of place, like a stain on an otherwise spotless canvas. Her heart pounded as she took in her surroundings. Everything screamed luxury, from the massive double doors to the marble steps leading up to them. This is where you live?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Lucas gave her a sideways glance as he unlocked the front door. "It's home," he said simply, pushing the door open and gesturing for her to follow. Ivy stepped inside, and her breath caught in her throat. The interior was just as grand as the exterior. Polished floors gleamed under the soft glow of chandelier lights, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and something expensive she couldn't place. The furniture looked like it belonged in a magazine, modern, sleek, and completely untouchable. She felt like an intruder. Lucas watched her carefully, as though Trying to gauge her reaction, you all. Right, he asked. Ivy blinked, snapping herself out of her trance. Yes, she said, though her voice was quieter than usual. I've just never been anywhere like this. Lucas gave a small nod as though he understood. He motioned toward a set of stairs that curved gracefully up to the second floor. Come on, we'll talk upstairs. As Ivy followed him, her eyes wandered again, taking in the artwork on the walls, the intricate details in the architecture. Everything felt surreal, like she had stepped into someone else's life, and in a way she had once. They reached the second floor. Lucas led Ivy down a long hallway lined with tall windows and intricate light fixtures. He stopped in front of a door at the far end and pushed it open. Ivy stepped inside, expecting something simple, but what she saw left her speechless. The room was massive. A king-sized bed sat in the center, covered in silken sheets and flanked by elegant nightstands. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting soft light across the polished wooden floors. A sleek vanity table, a plush sofa, and a flat screen TV mounted on the wall completed the picture. It wasn't a guest room, it was a five-star suite. Lucas leaned against the door frame, watching her reaction with mild amusement. Tomorrow's the wedding, he said, breaking the silence. You'll need to look your best. Ivy tore her gaze from the luxurious surroundings and frowned at him. And why exactly do I need to look my best? Lucas sighed and rubbed the back of his neck as if reluctant to answer. Because I want my ex to see what she lost. Ivy blinked, then let out a sharp laugh. Wait a minute, all of this is about your ex? She crossed her arms and gave him a look that was equal parts amused and incredulous. So you can't move on from your ex, and now you're dragging me into your little revenge fantasy? Lucas's jaw tightened. It's not like that, he said, his tone clipped. And it's not up for discussion. Before Ivy could press him further, he stepped aside and gestured toward the ensuite bathroom. Wash up, my stylist will be here soon to give you a little polish. His eyes drifted briefly over her ragged clothes, messy hair, and dirt-streaked face, but he said nothing more before turning and leaving the room. Ivy huffed in frustration as the door closed behind him. Unbelievable, she muttered under her breath. Still, she couldn't deny that the offer was tempting. A hot shower, clean clothes, and if Lucas was serious, a makeover that might make her look like someone else entirely. She wandered around the room, her fingers trailing over the martop vanity and the soft velvet cushions on the sofa. On the nightstand there was a small crystal lamp that must have cost more than anything she'd ever owned. Everything in the room was expensive, shiny, and perfect. It made her feel out of place. Shaking off the feeling, she headed into the bathroom and stopped dead in her tracks. The bathroom was as grand as the bedroom, with gleaming white tiles, a glass-walled shower, and a bathtub so deep it could probably fit two people. Plush toe walls were neatly folded on the counter, and there was a tray of fancy soaps and lotions that smelled like lavender and vanilla. Ivy peeled off her dirty clothes and stepped into the shower. As the hot water poured over her, she felt days of grime and exhaustion melt away. She scrubbed her skin until it was pink and lathered her hair with shampoo that smelled like jasmine. For the first time in forever, she felt human. After what felt like forever, she finally stepped out, wrapped herself in a soft, oversized towel, and padded back into the room. She was still towel drying her hair when there was a knock at the door. Come in, she called hesitantly. The door opened, And in walked a woman who looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. She was tall with sleek black hair and a sharp, tailored outfit. A large black bag hung from her shoulder and she moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "Hello, Ivy," the woman said with a warm but professional smile. "I'm Vanessa. Lucas called me to help you. Get ready." She set the bag down on the vanity and began unpacking an array of tools and products: curling irons, makeup palettes, nail polish, and more. Ivy sat down at the vanity feeling a little overwhelmed as Vanessa got to work first. Vanessa tackled Ivy's hair. She combed through the tangles with practiced ease, applied a smoothing serum and began styling it with a curling iron. The messy strands were transformed into soft, glossy waves that framed Ivy's face beautifully. Next came Ivy's nails. Vanessa filed and shaped them, then painted them with a delicate nude polish that made her hands look elegant and refined. "Now let's do something about your skin," Vanessa said, gently inspecting Ivy's face. She applied a cooling face mask to calm Ivy's irritated skin, then carefully covered any blemishes and redness with foundation and concealer. Slowly but surely Ivy's pimples and acne faded from view, replaced by smooth, glowing skin. Vanessa added soft touches of makeup, a hint of blush, a swipe of mascara, and a natural-looking lip color. By the time she finished, Ivy barely recognized herself when Vanessa finally stepped back. Ivy stared at her reflection in stunned silence. Her messy hair, tired eyes, and uneven complexion were gone. In their place was a woman who looked polished, confident, and dare she think it beautiful. Vanessa smiled. "You clean up nicely," she said with a wink. Ivy blinked, still trying to process what she was seeing. Was this really her? "Lucas is going to be impressed," Vanessa added as she packed up her tools. I's heart skipped a beat at the mention of his name. She didn't care what Lucas thought, did she? But as she stood up and smoothed down the silk robe Vanessa had left for her, she couldn't help but wonder what he would say when he saw her like this. Because for the first time in a long time, Ivy felt like she was more than just a girl from the streets. She felt unstoppable. Ivy descended the grand staircase slowly, her bare feet barely making a sound on the polished wood. She felt strange in the silk robe, her newly styled hair brushing her shoulders as she approached the kitchen. The faint aroma of garlic and herbs greeted her. Lucas stood by the stove stirring something in a pan. He glanced up when she entered and froze for a moment. His expression was unreadable, but then a slow, approving smile tugged at his lips. "You clean up well," he said, his voice low and warm. Ivy shrugged, trying to ignore the way her heart fluttered at his gaze. "It's mostly the stylist's magic." They sat at the dining table where Lucas had set out plates of pasta and salad. They ate quietly, the tension from earlier lingering, though it was softened now by an odd unspoken understanding. When they finished, Lucas leaned back in his chair, his gaze lingering on her. "Good night, Ivy." "Good night," she said, her voice softer than she intended as she headed upstairs. She could still feel his eyes on her, and for the first time she wondered what tomorrow might bring. The night before the wedding, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling of dread that gnawed at him. The hours spent in his lavish home, surrounded by luxury and comfort, seemed to slip away in a blur of memories. He stared out of the large windows, watching the darkened cityscape below, but his mind was far from the present. It was somewhere else, back in the past with her. Halida He had loved her with everything. She had been the center of his world, the one he thought he would build a future with. He had been a fool, really. So blind to her faults, so willing to overlook the cracks in their relationship. She was his first real love. Beautiful, charming, and effortlessly captivating. Lucas had always thought he could be the one to fix her, to show her how much he cared and build a perfect life together. But Halida wasn't the woman he thought she was. Lucas's mind drifted to the nights they spent together, the way she would smile sweetly and tell him everything he wanted to hear. She seemed to be his perfect match. But as their relationship grew, cracks began to show. Small things at first, little inconsistencies he shrugged off. She would criticize his ambitions, belittle his dreams, the things that mattered to him, the things he poured his heart into, his work, his vision, were nothing but jokes to her. You'll never make it, Lucas. You're not cut out for the big leagues, she said once, her tone dripping with disdain. Just stick to your little ideas, they're not worth anything. Her words haunted him. At the time, he didn't understand how toxic it all was. He believed she was right because he had no success to prove her wrong, but eventually her cruelty escalated. She started openly disregarding him, flaunting her independence while he continued to give her everything. The pain of constantly being overlooked, belittled, and dismissed began to erode him, but he never saw it for what it was. Until the day he walked in on her with someone else. The image of that moment was burned into his mind. He had come home early from a business trip, eager to surprise her. The house was quiet, too quiet, and then as he pushed open the bedroom door, he saw it, Halida in the arms of another man. She didn't even try to hide it. There was no guilt in her eyes. She didn't even stop to acknowledge him. It shattered him. He had given everything to her, believed in her when no one else did, and she had betrayed him in the most brutal way possible. But what hurt the most wasn't the infidelity itself, it was the cold indifference. She showed no apologies, no remorse, just a look that said she was done with him. It was that moment, the moment of raw betrayal, that broke the Lucas he had been, the love he'd felt, the trust he'd placed in her. All of it crumbled in an instant. In the weeks that followed, Lucas spiraled, but in that spiraling something changed inside him. The pain, the rejection, it became fuel. Instead of falling apart, he buried himself in his work. Every insult, every cold word from Halida became a reminder that he couldn't afford to fail. He couldn't afford to let her be right. He built his empire brick by brick, driven by a need to prove to the world and to himself that he was more than she had ever given him credit for. Years passed and success followed. Lucas became the billionaire he had always dreamed of being, but it didn't come without a cost. His ambition consumed him, leaving little room for anything else, especially love. No one could compare to Halida, and though he had built a life others would envy, he never truly moved on. The pain of losing her lingered, and now as he stood on the precipice of attending her wedding, Lucas realized that a part of him still wanted her back. Maybe it was the unfinished business between them. Maybe it was because despite everything he hadn't been able to shake the memory of her. But this wedding, it wasn't just about showing Haller what she had lost. It was about showing himself that he was more than the man who had once been broken by her. When he had asked Ivy to come with him, something shifted in Lucas. Maybe it was the way Ivy had looked at him earlier, her raw honesty and her quiet strength. She didn't ask for anything from him. She wasn't part of his world. And maybe that was the kind of escape he needed. He could lose himself in her for just a moment, pretend to be the man he'd always wanted to be, but deep down he knew he couldn't escape the ghosts of his past, the ones that haunted him whenever he thought of Halida as he sat in his luxury car staring out at the city lights. Lucas couldn't help but wonder if this whole charade, bringing Ivy to the wedding, pretending for the night, was a way to bury the feelings he still had for Halida. Maybe, just maybe, he was trying to convince himself that he was better off without her. But as he prepared for the night ahead, the truth lingered in his chest, heavy and undeniable. He was still hurt, and he wasn't sure if he would ever be truly free of her. The morning of the wedding arrived with the soft light of dawn spilling through the elegant curtains of Lucas's mansion. Ivy, who had never slept in such luxury, lay curled up on the soft mattress, completely unaware of the early hour. The bed was like nothing she had ever experienced, firm but cushioned just enough to make her feel weightless. The cool air from the air conditioning wrapped around her like a blanket, and for the first time in a long while, Ivy felt like she was in a place where she truly belonged. She had never slept so deeply in months, the peacefulness of the room lulling her into a deep slumber, her messy hair still damp from her shower the night before, tangled in every direction. But it didn't matter. The world outside could wait. Ivy wasn't used to feeling like this, safe and comfortable. She had forgotten how it felt to just sleep. The door creaked open softly as the stylist Vanessa stepped in. She was impeccably dressed as usual, her sharp black suit making her look like a professional ready for business. She looked at Ivy with a quiet smile, but there was no time for pleasantries. The wedding was fast approaching, and Ivy was still asleep, completely oblivious to the timeline. Vanessa stood there for a moment, debating whether to let Ivy sleep just a little longer, but when she saw the time, she sighed and moved toward the bed. Time to wake up, Ivy, she said gently, nudging the blanket aside. We have a lot to do today. Ivy groaned softly, the comfort of the bed tugging at her. She squinted against the morning light and buried her face into the pillow, her voice muffled. Just a few more minutes, she muttered, her exhaustion evident. Vanessa, unbothered by the resistance, took a step back and pulled out her phone. She dialed Lucas's number, holding the phone up to her ear. Lucas, she's still asleep. I think I'm going to need your help seconds later. Lucas's voice came through, calm and collected, but with an underlying urgency. I'll be there in a minute. A few moments later, the door swung open and Lucas walked in, his presence commanding the room. When his eyes landed on Ivy, his heart skipped a beat. There she was, lying there, completely unaware of the effect she was having on him. Her hair was still tangled and wild, a complete contrast to the polished, sophisticated woman he had seen the night before. For a moment, Ivy looked like an innocent child, so completely vulnerable and unguarded in her sleep. A smile tugged at the corner of Lucas's lips before he caught himself. He quickly straightened his face, trying to compose himself. Wake up, sleepyhead, he said, his voice a mix of authority and amusement. We have business to attend to, and don't you dare disappoint me. His words were firm, but there was an edge of humor that softened his tone. Ivy, groggy, lifted her head, squinting at him, still not fully awake. The warmth of the bed and the comfort of the room were enough to make her want to ignore him and slip back into her dream world, but the sound of his voice snapped her into reality. Fine, fine, she muttered, pushing herself up the softness of the blankets. Reluctant to let her go, she quickly rushed to the bathroom to take her bath. The cold air biting at her skin as she moved from the warmth of the bed to the cool tiles of the bathroom. Meanwhile, Vanessa set to work laying out all the tools she would need for the makeover. When Ivy emerged freshly bathed, she felt like a new person. Vanessa immediately got to work on her, carefully styling her hair, applying makeup, and making her look as polished and refined as possible. The pink designer dress that Lucas had hand-picked for her hung on the back of the door, and once she slipped it on, she felt a transformation, not just on the outside but something inside her too. The woman looking back at her in the mirror was unrecognizable from the one who had been living on the streets just days ago. As they walked out the door, Lucas glanced at her once more, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. She looked different, beautiful. He couldn't help but smile. They drove to the wedding venue in silence, and as they arrived, the grandeur of the building made Ivy's heart race. Lucas held her hand as they entered the wedding hall. The moment they stepped inside, all eyes turned to them. Whispers spread across the room, some curious, some surprised. They made an impression as they walked in together, Ivy by his side, a perfect contrast to the woman she had been just hours ago. Lucas couldn't help but glance at her, his smile growing. Ivy for once felt like she was stepping into a world where she belonged, and as they walked hand in hand, she couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something bigger than either of them could understand.